An absolutely unbelievable week in college basketball, Brad, has just come to a close. There's a couple more Pac-12 games on here on Sunday night. We're recording as Northwestern tries to fight with Michigan. We decided we could start the recording early because Northwestern got pummeled in the first half without Vic Law. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of when we're recording. And Brad, there was a ton of buzzer beaters this week, ton of crazy comebacks. I know Thursday night especially, there was no great games in terms of what they're going to mean for the NCAA tournament, but you just had so many crazy shots, so many crazy plays. You had the McCants half quarter for the win for New Mexico State over Grand Canyon. You had the UCLA comeback. You had John Morant literally jump over a dude to dunk. There was 3 or 4 buzzer beaters that day. And then yesterday, plenty of more crazy action, including, unfortunately, Brad, some tough luck for your Friars on the road at Georgetown.
I mean, well, first of all, I mean, with that Oregon UCLA ending, that was just unbelievable. I was watching that one live, and so it was down 8, and then I think Pritchard dribbled off his foot. They foul a 3-point shooter. It's like, all right, we're getting somewhere now. And then you just knew with the way that Oregon had been unraveling down the stretch that foul up 3 was going to backfire. Going into Providence, Georgetown, where in my memory, Providence hasn't been burned in that scenario, in terms of being up 3, playing it out, and then them making it. So maybe that's why this feels so fresh. But I mean, that was the perfect opportunity to foul. I mean, there was 4 seconds, right? This is the first one, the Mac McClung shot. There's 4 seconds. He's catching it with his back to the basket. I mean, you foul him, then there's 3. Even if there's an offensive rebound, there's barely any time for them to get a shot off. If we foul up 3, they play it out. McClung obviously hits what people call a half-court shot. It was not. It was almost a 3-pointer. It was 2 steps behind the 3-point line because they just didn't play any defense, which. I was furious about not fouling up 3. Then after, Cooley says in the press conference that he told them to foul up 3, but they just couldn't make it happen. If you watch that Mac McClung buzzer beater, no one had any intentions of fouling. Right? You watch Mekhi Ashton Langford guard McClung, there was literally no the thought of foul. It clearly never went through his head or anyone else on the team. They were not trying to foul whatsoever.
May I chime in briefly?
Yes.
Is it fair to suggest that perhaps Mekhi Ashton Langford isn't the smartest player in college basketball, and that perhaps even if Ed Cooley told him to foul, he may not have listened?
But no one was hands on their head oh, foul, what are you doing? Oh, my God. But that's the thing. I saw some people saying, which isn't a crazy take, but they're saying if Cooley had told them to foul and they didn't foul, that's more concerning than what actually happened. But I don't think we can blame the coach if he tells someone to foul and they don't foul. It's very difficult for me when assigning blame, how much goes to coach versus player. It seems most people like to assign more blame to the coach, but with Providence fans, because they love Cooley so much, they tend to assign more blame to the player. But if a coach tells someone to foul and they don't, that can't be the coach's fault. It just can't.
Yeah, I mean, it's impossible to know what Ed Cooley said in the locker room. I will say this. I am not entirely a foul up 3 guy. There's a lot of people who are no matter what the circumstance, you always foul up 3 in the late stages. To me, I think you have to have tremendous trust in your team, because if you foul a guy and they wind up in the shooting motion, or the ref even just interprets a guy's reading the foul and chucking it up as a shooting foul, then you've just increased their chance of winning exponentially. With 4 seconds to play, Mac McClung going the length of the floor, shooting a 30-footer for a tie is what, a 25% chance shot at most. It's it's a low percentage shot in a game where at worst it's overtime. And so I understand from the perspective you don't foul, because if you foul and you give them 3 free throws, it's a lot easier than that shot. and there's like more things that can go wrong. So like I personally think like in that situation, the 4 seconds to play, you probably should foul up 3.
Yeah, I think because 4 seconds, you have 4 dribbles, right? Like you can go the length of the court in 4 seconds. That's when there's 1 second, you can't foul, right? 2, you're cutting it close. But with 4 seconds, and I mean, I don't know how many times or if any you've seen the play, but so they had Malik White pressuring the inbounder, who was the shortest guy on the court at 6'2", instead of guys like Nichols with these 7'2" wingspans. Or even guys in the game like Jackson or like Diallo who are bigger. So it didn't make much sense to have Malik White on the ball. And then it looked like Micaiah Langford like lunged for a steal or to like cut him off on the sideline and like kind of force him middle. But then there was no one to kind of pick up there. It was all discombobulated. And then in the second overtime when they hit the 3-pointer to tie it, it looked like that they were supposed to switch and they didn't, and he's got a wide open 3. But 10 seconds, I can see playing a little defense first, but you should probably give the foul at like 4 or 5 because, all right, let's say, all right, you're up 3, you foul with 5 seconds, they hit both. Now you inbound it. Now you have 2 free throws with like 4 seconds left. They still have to go the length of the court again, right? Even if you missed both free throws, they still have to go the length of the court to score. So whether it's a 3-point game, 2-point game, 1-point game, that's such a more difficult position to be in.
Yeah, no, I buy it. I think once again, my main concern with ever fouling up 3 is just, do you accidentally foul a shooter? Because then you just give it away. I don't know the numbers on that in terms of whether it would be really pretty possible to track. But like in what circumstance does just fouling up 3 not pay off? Or if you try to go for the foul, you like reach out and then you get burned, and then he has like if Mackay tries to foul immediately and McClung gets away without the foul, McClung's wide open dribbling. So instead of just playing hard defense, so like I still think fouling up 3 is probably the right call, but I think you can make a case as to why there's a reason not to. Would be my point.
And just one other thing on the foul up 3 debate is a lot of people coming at me with, 50% of coaches don't foul up 3. How can Cooley be an idiot for not fouling up 3? Like, where are you getting that number? Like, is that like an actual tracked thing that 50% don't foul up 3? I feel like that's just like pull out of the air, like, some do it, some don't. Oh, it's got to be 50%.
I mean, I don't know if it's higher or lower than 50%, but I certainly don't think that's a published statistic.
Yeah, so that's just pulling something, and then just a couple more things about the Providence program in general, because we're in message board meltdown mode right now,
of course,
which is not a fun place to be. But we got these people who will defend Cooley at all costs, which is fine, right? But their main argument is, Cooley's doing a bad job. Would you rather have Keno Davis as the head coach? Like, how is that? Like, how can you go from, I think Cooley should have fouled up 3 to, oh yeah, you do? Well, how about if we had like the worst coach in program history? Like, let's play a scenario out where Cooley's mad at the message board being mean to him. He wants fans are mean, right? He goes in and coaches Boston College next year, right?
Sure.
And we need to get a new coach. Why would that be automatic that coach would be as bad as the worst coach in program history? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So the people who want Cooley fired are very much illogical and irrational. But the people who say, if you fire Cooley, we'll go back to the bottom of the Big East, that's also just subjective. I don't know, stupid.
Once again, yeah, no, it's a bad take. But like, as we mentioned, the Providence job is not, like, as Goodman did that poll, Providence is not a super highly regarded job in the Big East. I mean, you'd get a good, like, Ed Cooley was not some absurdly accomplished coach when he arrived. He wasn't Fran McCaffrey at Siena. He didn't make an NCAA tournament at Fairfield. Like, what's to say that you're going to go out and land a coach who is as good for that program as Ed Cooley? You don't know that you're going to do as bad as Keno Davis, but in terms of pure resume, I wonder who they'd be able to get. And I think my typical bar with firing coaches is, unless you're at like an elite job where good is accepted. Like obviously with Texas, if you're firing Rick Barnes, obviously he was going to get a job right away because Rick Barnes is like a well-regarded coach. They were just kind of done with him. If you're going to but I saw the Florida with Mike White. I saw people saying like Mike White should get fired, which I think is a horrible take. My take is like, if you're going to fire a coach, if they're going to have a job the next day, like in hand from another, maybe not like that same level, but very close to that same level program, you're probably not very smart for firing him. If Mike White can go out tomorrow and get 4 jobs in the ACC, Big 12, and SEC that open up, then why are you firing Mike White if you're at Florida?
Well, that's like Cooley could have 5 straight years of not making the NCAA tournament, and he still wouldn't be fired. I mean, he's there for as long as he wants to be, right? But if the fans who want him fired, number one, it's not even realistic. You might as well not even talk about it. Or 2, it would be Jamie Dixon 2.0.
Yeah.
Like it would be an absolute embarrassment, to the program. And the odds are it would be a downgrade. Now, the odds are also that it wouldn't be the worst coach in program history again, but you're almost certainly downgrading. And much better coaches than Cooley have had much worse seasons than Providence has had so far. Look at Bob Huggins with West Virginia. I mean, Baylor's going to go back-to-back years not making the tournament with Scott Drew, who's a very well-regarded coach. I mean, there are many coaches who are better and have had worse seasons. I mean, even UNC didn't make the NCAA tournament once. Kentucky. I mean, we can go on and on. Louisville. But yeah, it's just crazy. And then
well, if you're Providence, like sure they have some veterans, but it doesn't, like this year being a bad year, and this also year is not that far from being a pretty good year. Like a couple of breaks right now, and this team is 500 of the Big East, maybe better. And they're not that far off. Like the core is still of Reeves, Duke, Ashton Langford, Greg Gant, who's coming next year. They're in on guys like Earl Timberlake. The core is there. Jimmy Nichols is fine. The core is there to be really good, and they've been good in the past. So for me, if I'm firing a coach, there has to be a reason to not believe. There's no reason to not believe in Ed Cooley at Providence.
No, I mean they certainly underachieved last year. There's no question about it. They needed the Big East tournament to ensure that they made the NCAA tournament, right? They needed some big wins there to kind of punch their ticket. But last year they were playing without Emmett Holt, 12-5 2 seasons ago. This year I thought that they'd have Evan Holt, starting at power forward, putting up double-figure points, and then Reeves has been out. So there has been injury issues. People cite the NCAA tournament record. That's the quickest. Grass is always greener on the other side. I mean, you don't understand how much better it is to lose in the first round than to not, be in at all. It's not even close. And then I think the thing that's hurting a lot of fans is that they were not happy with the team last year. Right? They didn't like the 3 seniors, Cartwright, Lindsey, and Cartwright was an amazing player, right? He was very, very good. He was an all Big East level player, and the fans didn't like him. My personal theory is it dates back to his freshman year when Josh Fortune transferred pretty late in the offseason, and they had a gaping hole at the 2 guard. So they kind of had to force the trio of Cartwright, Lamamba, and Lindsey, and kind of split that 2 guard spot. And none of the 3 were ready, and they all struggled throughout the season. And if they, played adequately, Providence could have even been like a 3 seed, right? They ended up as a 6 seed that year. And I think a lot of fans kind of stuck that perception of those guys throughout their careers, even though they were all valuable starters. And then the other thing with Cartwright is, the fans thought he was too demonstrative, like show up teammates, kind of point and do the hands in the air sort of thing. They thought Bullock, wasn't demonstrative enough. They said he was too low energy, which I agree with. I wasn't a huge Bullock guy, and he was kind of a low energy guy. And they didn't like Lindsey because he couldn't dribble. Like, he would only shoot threes and play defense, something that they could really use, with his versatility defensively. So, and then, sorry for these prolonged rants, but the other thing is, in terms of this year's team, it's not like this team should be in the NCAA tournament picture, because the things that have them out right now is the blown game against Georgetown, which is the least egregious of their three miscues. They have the terrible loss at Wichita State where they, literally gave that away. People at the time were telling me, "Oh, how do you know Wichita State's going to be a bad loss?" Like, we knew since last June they were going to be a bad loss, and it's been a terrible loss. And then blowing the 20-point lead to UMass. So even if two of those things go our way, we're in bracketologies right now. So there's really no excuse, right? You can't really use, "Oh, this is a young team," because the things that have gone wrong were so avoidable and so like mental error that you can't even blame like inexperience. It's just plain, dropping the ball.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think your point about, before we move on, I think your point about fan bases kind of going down on a player and like never recovering is super real. The one guy I could think of this with is Evan Fisher at Siena. It's a very like local example, but I mean, this dude was absolutely hated for 3 years at Siena because he was terrible his freshman and sophomore year, and they thought that his like being bad was also stopping Willem Brandwick, who is this like high upside Dutch guy they had on the roster, from becoming good. And he was also like Jimmy Pat's favorite player, so like that also didn't help the Siena fan bases like for Evan Fisher. And last year he was like a nice rotation player, and Siena fans still hated him. And then this year he is averaging 17 and 7. The last 4 games he's averaging 23 and 9 on 60% from the field and 50% from three. And someone posted on the message board the next morning, Evan Fisher still wouldn't start on a good MAC team. And I was like, dude, are you kidding me? The dude is averaging 23 and 9. He is literally one of the more productive big men I can remember in the MAC so far. I mean, he has been fantastic. And it's just so crazy. Like once a fan base is anti a player, just like if they're anti a coach, it's very hard to change the public opinion.
Is it the opposite with Ashton Langford? Who, I mean, he's just terrible. I mean, but they'll move mountains to and kind of shift whatever they need to appraise him. I mean, he had 8 assists to 1 turnover, but he didn't like create any of those. They were all out of set plays, except for like 2, right? So it's like he's the one with the ball whose spot in the play is to pass it. He's not. I don't know if he took a dribble inside the paint, right? It's just whatever he does. It's just it gets praised that, oh, we need him more. He's the only true point guard. But I mean, he might be the best point guard they have right now because Duke has not been good and White is now in a shooting slump. But he's certainly not good. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, let's end that on that, Brad. I mean,
that was an extended rant. I'm sorry.
It's all right. I'm sure the listeners enjoy the passion. And if they don't, they probably shouldn't be listening to the pod. Anywho, favorite game of the week, Brad, because there was a ton. What was your favorite game? So many buzzer beaters, so many upsets. I think for me, just that UCLA game, to see their energy, to see Jalen Hands and pick up Moses Brown's chin in that video that's been all over the internet. But like, they just made shot after shot. It was so exciting. I was standing there. I was working at the gym, so I was standing there making sure no one died while I watched the UCLA game, and it was just a fantastic ball game.
Yeah, that was a very fun game. And then also I think it was Wednesday, Marquette Creighton.
Oh yeah.
I watched the last few minutes, like maybe the last 10 minutes, and then they're down 5, and they miss a 3, and then Chartouni gets the rebound, misses the layup, gets it back, puts it in. 0.8 seconds, Creighton ball up 3. That's, I mean, you have to switch the station there. I mean, they're going to call a couple timeouts. There's going to be another foul. There's going to be this and that. but like, there's other basketball games on. Like, you can't be sitting on that. Yet I get a text from my friend about, wow, crazy that Marquette sent that to overtime. I had no idea what he was talking about, and it took me a few minutes to find the replay. But just to talk about stupid avoidable plays. All you have to do is pass it to someone inside the 3-point line. Doesn't even have to be a catch. Just like pass it off their leg, right? And like time runs out. But they throw it all the way down court, goes out of bounds, and Sam Hauser gets kind of a lucky call there from the ref, but sends it overtime, and then Marquette pulls it out.
Yeah, no, it was crazy. I didn't watch almost any of that game. I was on the call for Northwestern men's basketball that night. So really exciting game that I was kind of following on Twitter, because I've got like TweetDeck up while I'm broadcasting it, so I like see things go nuts, like little like swells of games where like all the college basketball people start tweeting about it, and I'm just out here telling how Northwestern really stunk in the second half, even without Tyler Cook on the floor for Iowa. That was not fun, but that game was absurd. Marcus Howard is absurd. I know the Trae Young thing's getting thrown around a lot at this point, which is warranted at this point. It has to be considered warranted. I mean, he's just finding a way to make shot after shot. He's an unbelievable shot maker, and it'll be interesting to see if he stays another year. I think he's probably gone. Like, what more can you do in college than what he's doing this year?
Yeah, I think Howard's probably gone. They do have Kobe McEwen coming in next year. I know I mentioned that on a few podcasts, but he's one of the best sit-out transfers available. He's sitting out at Marquette right now, and he'll be able to step right in there. So you'll have him. Greg Elliott's coming back next year. He's redshirting with an injury. He's a good prospect. And even if one of their wings transfers, like a Bailey transfers or whatever, they'll still have the Hausers. They'll still have their front court intact. So Marquette should probably be back toward the top of the Big East again next year.
They surely look to be at the top of the Big East, especially given the week that St. John's had. And I really wanted to highlight 3 teams that were really building momentum. I thought looked good, had a chance to really establish themselves as top 20, top 15 even teams in college basketball. And they just had really bad weeks. I don't think any of them won a game. Ohio State, Iowa State, and St. John's. So Iowa State comes off the big home win over Kansas. There's so much excitement. And then they go out on the road to Baylor, and they lose by 3 to Baylor, and then lost at home to Kansas State. So that's 2 losses to bottom, I would say, 5 teams in the Big 12, possibly bottom 3. Then St. John's, this St. John's team was really rolling, had beaten Georgetown in overtime. They'd already blown out Marquette, and they go to Villanova and they lose. That's not a bad loss by any means, but it's not a great game. They could have won that game, and then they, without Shamori Pons, it should be noted, lay an egg, lose at home to DePaul. So now they're 2-3 in the Big East. Their non-conference resume is not good. I mean, the Rutgers win isn't going to age for them at all. The VCU win might a little bit. Georgia Tech on a neutral is probably not going to do you much either. So they'll probably be fine, because I think they'll probably win enough ball games. But that's a bit of a concerning loss to DePaul. And then Ohio State, I mean, I was very impressed with how they looked against Michigan State despite the loss. Then they come out, they lose at Rutgers by 3 in a game where you just have to win it. I know Rutgers is a tough place to play. They get rowdy in there, but you have to find a way to win that ball game. They have 40% for the field in that game. And then they go to Iowa and they lose by 10. Give Iowa credit. I think this Iowa team, we maybe forgot about them a little bit after starting pretty slow in Big Ten play. I thought they were really good against Northwestern, especially without Cook. I thought Wieskamp made some tremendous plays in that ball game. I thought Luka Garza was terrific. And against Ohio State as well, they go out and get 10 more from Wieskamp, 16 more from Luka Garza. They get 11 from Ryan Kriener, who's been a lot better. So Ohio State, Iowa State, and St. John's, 3 down weeks.
Yeah, so St. John's, you mentioned it, they're in a bit of trouble. Now, this is going to be another great test case for if the committee will overlook a game where your best player is not playing. Given how they treated Notre Dame last year, being Notre Dame would have made the tournament had Davidson not beaten URI, because Davidson stole that last bid. Notre Dame would have been in. They were on the record as the first team out. I think that kind of bodes well for St. John's if the committee is going to be consistent, right? That's the big caveat here. But I mean, DePaul's pretty good. DePaul has an uncanny ability to blow games. Like they absolutely blew the Northwestern game without an argument. The Boston College game, and then the Xavier game, all three of and then the Villanova game they were up 2. So that's, and then the Notre Dame game, probably the one loss that they didn't blow. But they beat Seton Hall, and they have a very good front court. Femi Olajobi was great in this game, so was Paul Reed, and then Jalen Butts was great against Seton Hall. So I mean, they have a great front court. Their senior perimeter players, Strus and Kane, are very good. I mean, if they're just like a one piece away from being a legitimate like tournament team. But the resume is probably not going to get them there because of all those blown games. But in another universe where they just make with one shot here, one shot there, instead of missing 10 in a row against Northwestern, they're in great shape, and Leitao might be a more gainfully employed man.
Yeah, like every time I watch DePaul, I'm like, these guys aren't that bad. I mean, they find a way to lose a lot of games, and for them to come away with that Seton Hall win and that St. John's win back-to-back has to give them a lot of confidence. But I mean, yeah, they got blown up by Notre Dame, but they were only down by 3 at the half. And then Northwestern, they were up by, I think, 15 in the second half, and then immediately gave up a 25-0 run and lost the game by 7. They lost by 3 to BC in a game they led in the final minute. They lost by 9 to Xavier in a game they were right there in. And then they lost by 5 to Villanova on the road in a game they led by double digits. Like, they're really not that bad. I know Ken Palm doesn't love them, but I think Femi Olajobi is a really tough matchup. He's super strong. He can really score, especially for a team like St. John's that's going small. He can really put it in. So DePaul's not that bad, but it's certainly not going to be a good loss come Selection Sunday. It might be good enough that you can forgive it, given they were out without Shamori Pons, but that's a concerning one. I was just so stunned by Iowa State, especially to lose. I mean, it's one thing to lose at Baylor on the road, slow, hard to get up for a game against a bottom 3 conference team after a win over Kansas, but to lose at home to Kansas State?
Yeah, Kansas State is, I mean, they have an anemic offense. I mean, that Iowa State win was their best win by far. Their next best win was probably Georgia State at home or Missouri on a neutral. So, Kansas State has a nice record. They've won some Big 12 games right now, but they still have a lot of work to do. And they completely halted Iowa State's momentum. I was able to watch this game, but I was able to watch a good portion of Iowa State's game versus Baylor. I don't really know what's going on. They just seem to be a little disjointed. Like I can't pinpoint like one sort of issue, but that's something where in a league like the Big 12, even the Big 12's bottom this year is pretty distinct and much worse than it normally is. But still, losses can really accumulate and pile up in a hurry.
Yeah, I think Iowa State's going to wind up like a 7 seed in the NCAA tournament and either go to the Final Four or lose in the first round.
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah. They're just a really hard team to figure out, and it'll be really interesting to see what they do in Big 12 play. But all the Kansas opposition to a Big 12 title, it's serious just to be Texas Tech, right?
Yeah, and I was pretty down on Texas Tech. I thought that like Ohio State, they would kind of just slip into that 20 to 25 range. But, Oklahoma, I guess, is still in the mix. I thought that they'd beat Texas Tech, but they did not. TCU hasn't beaten anybody yet. I think their best win is Fresno State. So that's a team that still has to prove it. But, I mean, even those teams have 2 losses so far. Texas Tech is undefeated, but we'll see how they fare against Kansas. But Kansas is certainly on their way. Ochai Ogbaji, or maybe I mixed up his names, but
you got it.
For a guy who is redshirted that just comes in and is this impact player, I mean, that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, he's a very athletic kid. I think the long-term question with Kansas is just, like, will they shoot it? Because if they're going to go small and play Lawson at the 5 all the time, and that's the whole plan, it's like play 4 guards, you need a Devontae Graham type shooter. You need guys who are going to hit shots. And obviously Vic can be that guy, but beyond that, is Charlie Moore going to hit outside shots? Is Quentin Grimes? Is Agbaji when he plays the 4? Because if you're going to play Garrett, Garrett and Agbaji, I think, are somewhat similar in terms of like do-it-all-do guys, although Agbaji has higher shooting potential. We'll see if one of them can space the floor a little bit. We'll see if Moore can start hitting some outside shots. Dawson, if they hit some outside shots, they'll create some room for Lawson, and they'll be pretty dangerous. But credit Bill Self for being aggressive and not worrying about burning a red shirt of a kid he thought could help his team.
Yeah, because Agbaji was one of the highest profile of the late stock risers. Guys that just kind of came out of nowhere after December of their senior year. So this is certainly a good showing to kind of prove that there is some value in these guys who come out of nowhere late. And it's crazy because I hadn't heard like a peep about him in terms of redshirting. It seems it was just like, oh, he hadn't played in the first few games, so I guess he's going to redshirt. And all of a sudden, when the news comes out, he's going to break his redshirt. Like Fran Fraschilla is like, this guy's not going to be around for 4 years. Like, oh, so athletic, he's so amazing, so this. Like, no one said this before. Like, he just came out of nowhere,
Well, yeah, I had heard the stuff like preseason that he was like a very impressive athlete, and the question was like, would he shoot it? Because he's 6'5" and versatile. And so if he's shooting the ball the way that some people are talking about, he's going to be a really high level kid. And like, yeah, the percentage chance that a kid of his just overall talent level is around when he's 23 years old, still playing college basketball, I feel like is probably pretty low.
Yeah, I didn't realize he was such a compelling athlete. Like I didn't know much about him. I just saw that Kansas picked him up late, and then when he wasn't playing, I figured he was going to redshirt. Even before that, I figured he would be kind of stuck in the rotation behind the Lawsons, both point guards, Quentin Grimes, Marcus Garrett. I thought maybe next year for him, but seems like enough guys have disappointed to the point. Especially Quentin Grimes. He's doing just enough to like keep people engaged and to stay on like second round of mock drafts. But he's been a pretty big disappointment as well.
Yeah, other than the Iowa State game, I think Grimes has been pretty terrible. Few teams that have not been terrible: Maryland and Ole Miss. Now, Ole Miss, I really want to touch on, Brad, because this is a team that preseason I thought, Kermit Davis will have them competitive. I don't think they'll make the tournament by any means. They got Terrence Davis, Devontae Shuler, Brian Tyree, some good guards. They're probably just not deep enough nor talented enough to compete in a league this good. They've proved us wrong pretty quick. And I think a lot of us wanted to see more from them after that Vanderbilt win. Maybe we weren't ready to fully jump in on this team, but certainly have proven it this week with the home win over Auburn in fairly convincing fashion, and then going on the road to Stark Vegas and beating a very good Mississippi State team.
Yeah, I had Ole Miss last in the SEC in the preseason. This comes after last year where I had them, I think, 5th or 6th, and thought that they would be a top 40 team and NCAA tournament team. They had obviously Terrence Davis, and then they're adding this JUCO transfer, Bruce Stevens, grad transfer, and Markel Crawford. They had Burnett. They had Tyree coming back after playing a lot the year prior, and they just fell flat. And it seems like it was a coaching thing where that group just didn't jive with Andy Kennedy because they got a new coach in with a worse roster. Objectively, you lose Burnett, you lose Markel Crawford, and then you lose Mark Canvas, Hyman, and Fermanichis, who are both longtime like rotation and kind of starting guys. And the team's just better. Like they added Blake Hinson, who was under the radar, like top 200 freshman who's been excellent. But besides that, it's pretty much the same guys as last year, but they've just been able to make this massive jump.
Tyree's been the biggest jump. I'm trying to pull up the numbers on him from last year, but he's just playing really high-level basketball. He's averaging 17 3.5 boards, 3.5 assists. Last year he was a 10-point, 2-board, 3-assist guy, turned it over a fair amount. So the turnovers are up for him a little bit, but he's had the ball a lot more. He's shooting 40% from 3, 50% from the field, 82% from the line. So he's been a really good point guard. And then so you add in that to Terrence Davis, who can make plays as well off the bounce. He's a big physical guard who can shoot the ball. And then Schuler, who can be that a third ball handler. They have 3 legit ball handlers in the backcourt, and they'll play them together a lot. So that's a pretty dangerous group. And Hinson and KJ Buffin are the 2 freshmen they've had who've given them just good minutes. Hinson's at 9.7 a game. Buffin's at 6 points and 5 boards. They're just getting just enough from those 2 guys at the 4. And then Stevens at the 5. They can play Stevens at the 4 because he could space a little bit with Olishnik. I want to say it's how he's pronounced his name. It's a tough one. The Polish center from transfer from Drake. So they just have just enough to survive. They don't really have that much depth. They're not getting much from like Rodriguez or Halems or Naylor, who were Halems and Naylor were 2 JUCO guys a lot of people liked, and then Rodriguez was like a late stock riser out of Woodstock Academy, like a long athletic wing. So the long-term question will be whether Kermit Davis can recruit high-level talent to Ole Miss. He wasn't an elite recruiter at Middle Tennessee State, and the league is getting so much talent every year in the recruiting cycles. He's got some decent signees in this class coming in for 19. Nobody special, though. It may not matter, though, if he can coach the way he's coaching this group.
Because you think, all right, you have Tyree and Schuler back, and then Buffin, Hinson, Olenichek. I mean, those are the 5 like rotation guys who are back. They'll probably be the starters. They had a couple nice recruits. The guy in Tavian Collum was, I think, top 150. I think so was Rodney Howard. And I think I've seen some good things about Sammy Hunter too. I think he's from the Bahamas at that center position. But then, like, if they want to be as good as they are this year, that they're going to need some of these reserves to take a jump next year. And with JUCO guys, a lot of times they can make a big jump in that second year, but we're going to have to see it. I'm sure that Ole Miss is going to be picked toward the bottom of, or like at least like the middle bottom of the SEC next year, despite having a strong year so far this year.
I mean, if they finish top 4 this year and bring back everybody but Davis and Stevens, I think they'll probably wind up fairly high.
You think
Tyree and Schuler?
I mean, I think it's going to depend on like the other recruiting classes, because like in terms of just like perception, like a good recruiting class holds a lot more weight than it should in terms of the next year's poll. This isn't a very like sexy roster. Like there's not a lot of big name guys. So I think that could be working against them from a perception point. I haven't seen enough of Ole Miss where I can say, losing Terrence Davis and Stevens will be that big of an impact. But whenever you bring back your starting guards, that's a good spot.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Completely agree. The other team I want to touch on who is really exceeding expectations is Maryland. Brad, it looks like the Terps are going to make you eat your words preseason. They're 14-3. They're 5-1 in the Big Ten now. Anthony Cowan's playing really nice basketball at point guard, and then they're just mauling teams on the glass. They're out rebounding in conference games their opponents by an average of almost 10 per ball game. They're playing some decent defense. They're protecting the rim, which is pretty big. They're shooting the ball better than I think we thought. They're shooting 37% from 3 in Big Ten play. So that's really important. They're getting just enough from Eric Ayala and Aaron Wiggins, who are both at 40% or better from 3. Jalen Smith's coming around. I mean, this team looks like they could be something.
Yeah, but just like a funny thing on that first, like I could very well be wrong. But like a month ago, I was pounding my chest thinking I was right after Maryland lost to Seton Hall. And I've seen that a lot recently with like the full-time college basketball people. Like, oh, I told you about NC State or about Team X or Team Y. And it's far too early, as I learned a month ago when I thought Maryland was headed to the gutter and I was patting myself on the back. Like, we have to wait till the end of the season before we start making these grand. Like I've seen a lot too about like, oh, you know, people thought Ohio State was going to be so far down. Like, look at them now, and then they lose, you know, to Rutgers this week, and then Iowa as well. So it's a little too early to pound the chest, but certainly heading in the wrong direction for my anti-Maryland stance.
I mean, it would be pretty. It wouldn't be, you know, completely out of the realm, but at this point, they look pretty safe as an NCAA tournament team. Like, home wins over Indiana and Nebraska are good. They have the road win at Minnesota, which will be a quadrant one. They have no bad losses. You know, they competed with Virginia. They competed with Purdue. They lost by 4 to Seton Hall. I mean, they still have a lot left on their schedule. They still have Michigan. They still have Michigan State. And Michigan twice. Michigan State once. Ohio State twice. They have Wisconsin twice. They have to go to Nebraska. They have to go to Iowa. So a lot can change, but they're in very good position to dance and, you know, maybe even be a top 7 seed.
That's why we were talking about how many bids that the Big Ten's going to get. I mean, there's very, very little opportunity for a bad loss. So you're going to back into quality wins. And it's going to be near impossible once you lost to like Rutgers or Illinois or Penn State at home, which with an unbalanced schedule, you might not even get them at home. So when the league's set up like that and the teams do their work in the non-conference, it creates like this, I guess, like an echo chamber where you're just gaining steam, right? Or where you're going to get – I would be – very surprised if the Big Ten does not get 10 teams into the NCAA tournament. That's just it's such a contrast from the Big East, where DePaul, Georgetown, Xavier are just fucking up for everybody. You know, like they've won a combined like 7 games between them. I think only 2 against each other, and then like they've damaged like Seton Hall. They damaged Butler, damaged St. John's. I mean, damaged Providence, but I mean that's a lost cause. Maybe even Creighton too. I'm not sure about Creighton, but they're just taking hits. Where in the Big Ten, Rutgers has that one hit against Ohio State, but even that was a road game, so it's very, very limited opportunities to mess up. Yeah,
like Northwestern and Rutgers will beat teams at home, and Illinois and Penn State are losing to everybody. So I mean, it's working out right now for the Big Ten. I think the Big Ten will get 10 bids, no doubt. The question is how many of those teams are going to be teams we can look to being second weekend level teams? Because to me, I think Michigan and Michigan State obviously are second weekend level teams. I don't know that there's another team in the Big Ten that I'm like super confident makes the Sweet 16.
But like we need 16 teams.
Sure.
Like in my top 25, I was kind of recalibrating earlier. I have Indiana at 13.
Ooh.
Now, they just lost to Maryland. It was 3 points on the road, right? But I don't think Indiana's even close to the 13th best team in the country. But my options here, so I have a pretty clear top 12. And then, I mean, we have Indiana, we have Marquette. Indiana blew out Marquette, given that was a couple months ago, but still. We have Oklahoma. I mean, maybe Oklahoma's the 13th best team in the country. Buffalo, who lost to Marquette, so they're kind of in the same boat. Maybe you could go Buffalo. UNC has the talent, but they've just lost too much. You know, they just got blown out by Louisville at home. Like you can't have them that high. NC State really hasn't beaten. Like they don't have a great win, and then they just lost at home to UNC. Auburn's falling. I guess you could go Maryland. That's kind of a big jump. And then you have, I mean, that's 9 more teams right there. It's just like you have to fill the top 25, and I guess Indiana's the 13th best team according to me, but I don't even believe that myself.
Yeah, I am not looking forward to my ballot this week. Like last year, I had a lot of fun with the top 25. This year, it feels like a chore. Like I get to 18, and I'm like, who am I throwing in there this week? And then it's usually a jinx. Like I threw Cincinnati in 2 weeks ago, I think, and they have since just looked absolutely terrible. You know, they lost to ECU, and then they probably should have lost at Tulsa, and then they very easily could have lost at home to UConn last night. So like I've totally ruined Cincinnati's season.
But it kind of cuts the other way where, like, toward the back, there's, like, too many teams close together. Where, like, my last few spots, like, all right, I need Louisville in there now. I guess I need Ohio State in there still. I guess I need Houston still. So then the last spot's like, all right, I guess I need Villanova, but that means no St. John's, even though they didn't have Shamori Pons. I mean, LSU is going to be in the top 25 sooner than later. I mean, their schedule is such. I looked at it the other day where they're going to rack up a lot of wins and kind of emerge again as a top 25 team. Iowa, I don't have them in. They could easily be ranked. So there's like too many options there at the back, but not enough in the middle.
None are good options. They're not teams I like get fired up to throw in the top 25. You know?
No, I think that St. John's, Houston, Villanova, TCU, Seton Hall, they're all top 25 caliber.
Yeah.
But I think that none of them are anywhere close to like top 15. You know, it's like there's just a weird cluster.
Yeah, no, I buy that. It'll be really interesting. It'll be really, really interesting to see how it all develops over the next couple of weeks, because I think like where we are right now is a lot different than where I think we thought we'd be 2 weeks ago. And in 2 weeks, we'll be in a lot different place than we think we are today. So college basketball at its finest, folks. And what a game that I really thought was college basketball at its finest was Gonzaga and San Fran last night. And I know a lot of people will talk about, you know, the Duke game yesterday or a buzzer beater, this or that. And to me, there's nothing more college basketball than San Francisco program that is very proud, but hasn't done a lot recently. Just packing their house. Now, granted, some Gonzaga fans were certainly in that mix. Packing their house for a primetime Saturday night showdown with a top 10 Gonzaga team, possibly a top 5 Gonzaga team. And they just looked the part. I mean, those two teams, I don't think I've watched a more fun basketball game all year in terms of two teams that just run good sets every single time down the floor. San Francisco runs some really good stuff. I mean, their pick and roll is beautiful. Ferrari's an absurd passer. They got guys who could attack off the bounce. Their bigs are solid. They're such an impressive basketball team to me. And I think Gonzaga runs really good stuff as well. Perkins does a great job. They get Rui stuff on the block. The Rui, Clark, Tilly lineup, if they can shoot the ball, especially if Tilly can shoot it for sure, can Clark and Rui hit some outside shots. And man, like you can't stop that because they're just so athletic, so big, so physical. Step out and shoot it. I mean, that was just an absurdly fun basketball game. I thought San Francisco really had a chance, and then they gave up the 2 threes back to back on back-to-back possessions and lost the game. But you can't watch that game, Brad, and watch San Francisco and not say, how are we not going to put this team in the NCAA tournament over Minnesota? Or that just seems like a very bubbly team to me. I mean, you go to that line, there are just so many average teams in college basketball, and it is hard to justify not having San Francisco in. Now, obviously, they're going to have to find a way to win some ball games, and probably going to have to beat Gonzaga. I don't think that's crazy. I think they're probably going to have to do it. But it will be an absolute shame if that team doesn't get to play in the NCAA tournament. So
I have yet to watch this game. I plan on watching it either tomorrow or Tuesday because it was my girlfriend's birthday on Saturday. Shout out to Becky for her birthday. But
you're a sellout. You're a sellout.
she wanted a shout out. So, but I watched San Francisco play Buffalo, and they certainly looked the part. That was over in Ireland at like 10 a.m. But I came away impressed with San Francisco. But it's funny, that's another team who last year had most of the same pieces. I think, was it Charles Minlin who redshirted, and he was one of their top.
He was hurt. Yeah, he was redshirted because he was hurt.
But like they lose like Sule Boom, who was one of their. I think he averaged double figures as a freshman.
He did, but he was really inefficient.
But when you lose a player like that and you disappointed last year, I think expectations were pretty low. Even though last year I thought that they would be top 3 in the WCC. This year they've proven that they're the second best team. I think clearly.
Yeah, no, I think they're way better than same area. They're clearly better than BYU, Loyola Marymount as well. I mean, they're a really good basketball team, up and down. They have guys who can make shots. They have guys who can create off the bounce. Minlend really changed that team because last year they didn't really have a guy who could go get his own shot late in the shot clock, and Minland's that guy for them. That he can go get a shot. He can slash. He can shoot the three. And Ferrari's so good at finding guys and putting the pass in the exact right spot. Like there was a pass he made in the first half where he got San Francisco got a rebound. He got the ball on like the outlet pass, and he threw like a 70-foot cross-court pass on a dime for a layup in a window that was so minute it was almost impossible to see. I mean, and I was floored. I love John Morant dunking, literally jumping over a person. But give me that play 10 times out of 10 because it was absolutely fantastic.
I mean, and this team is super experienced too. Guys like Nate Renfro, Minland, as we mentioned, Frankie Ferrari. These guys have been around. These guys have played together, and a lot of people always side with the mid-major team in terms of they're more watchable. Like people want to see them more than like insert bubble team X, right? Which I think is certainly an oversimplification. I would love to see San Francisco in the tournament, but like last year especially was I think we saw like the peak hypocrisy of this where people say like no one wants to see a team that's less than 500 in their league, right? But before those teams were less than 500, all you hear about, you got to watch Colin Sexton, right? Oh, Alabama, they're so watchable. Colin Sexton's so fun to watch. He's so competitive. But now that they're 8-10, suddenly he's unwatchable. Similar to like Texas with Mo Bamba too. So I think that logic is often flawed because I think a lot of people see these gaudy records and then kind of argue that they never had a chance. San Francisco's chance was taken away from them because they had Arizona State scheduled. Now that game has certainly depreciated in value than it looked at one point in time, but that would have been at least a quadrant 2 opportunity had they won.
Yes, and I will note something on that Arizona State game right now. I haven't reported this publicly, but this is something I've been told by a very close source to the San Francisco program. San Francisco offered to go to Tempe and play that game to make it up because there was the game was canceled because of the fires in the Bay Area and the smoke and everything. They offered to go to Tempe and Arizona State wouldn't do it. Like San Francisco play anywhere, and it's unfortunate that Arizona State won't give them that opportunity. But there's nothing you can do. I mean, I think in many cases you're right that mid-majors get a little too loved. And sure, everybody wants to see a 28-5 team that has been excellent all year. But in many cases, they aren't better than the high major. I think if you put on the tape and watch San Francisco play, watch them play Gonzaga. That's the best team they've played all year. Watch them play Buffalo, a top 25 team. That team's real.
Yeah, and then another thing regarding that about, people want to watch them more. I guarantee you that the ratings literally say that they want to see the bigger brand more. And if that's your kind of argument is, we should have Team X because people want to see them more, even if that isn't true, but like if that's your argument, then let's give UCLA and Notre Dame and insert big brand here, automatic bids and just for getting eyeballs,
Yeah. It's a very flawed argument. To me, it's like, I think the problem is it's impossible to quantify a team who doesn't have the opportunity to do it. Like it's not San Francisco's fault. Like San Francisco tried to schedule Arizona State. They'd scheduled Stanford, so they scheduled 2 Pac-12 teams. It's not their fault that the Pac-12 is the worst it's been in many years. They scheduled Harvard, who is a very good mid-major that is down this year because they've been hurt. That should have been a high-level basketball game against a top 50 team. Instead, it's against a 500 Harvard team. They played in a tournament with Stephen F. Austin, who's worse than we thought they'd be, and Buffalo, who's great. They scheduled 3 Pac-12 teams, actually, because they had Cal as well. They went to Cal. Cal sucked, too. That's also not their fault. They scheduled Eastern Washington, good mid-major team. Cal State Fullerton went to the tournament last year. UCSB won the Big West last year in the regular season, and they lost. They went down to the Thunderdome and lost by 2. I mean, that schedule could be a lot better than it's going to look on paper, and so it's impossible to quantify what they would have been if they had been given the opportunity to play in Arizona State, to play an actually good Pac-12 team, unlike Cal and Stanford. Like it's certainly not all their fault, and I think when you have a case like that, you have to obviously look at the metrics, and if you look at those predictive metrics, because that's really the bread and butter of a team like this, not necessarily their results based type things, but their predictives. San Francisco is ranked in KenPom right now. Let's pull it up here. I'm not seeing them. Give me 1 second. 45 in KenPom. So like they're 1 spot ahead of Clemson, 2 spots ahead of Seton Hall, 3 spots ahead of Arizona, 4 spots ahead of St. John's, 6 spots ahead of Kansas State, 8 spots ahead of Minnesota, 10 spots ahead of Arkansas, 11 ahead of Northwestern. Like the numbers say they're better, and the eyes say they're better. So give them a shot. Yeah.
But here's another thing about the mid-major is so you have very limited opportunities. No one's debating that. But if you win those, I mean, you are an absolute lock, right? If you have like 2 quadrant 1 games, you win both of those, and you are just absolutely locked in. Like you look at Nevada's resume last year, their best wins in the non-conference: home URI, home Davidson. Right? They have a road win at UC Irvine. It was 147 in KenPom, right? And then you look at conference. They have the win at Boise State, the win at Fresno State, who are both in NIT caliber. But those were their best opportunities. That's not much, right? They didn't have to go and schedule a high major. Well, they played Texas Tech and TCU and lost. So in kind of like resume opportunities in the non-league, they were really like 1 and 3 because they have the loss to San Francisco on a neutral too. So all it took was like 1 win, right? And then also URI's resume. I mean, that was built right because they have the away loss to Nevada, Virginia on a neutral, and away at Alabama with their losses. Their wins were Seton Hall on a neutral and Providence at home, and that was good enough, right? In league, their best win was, I think, Davidson at home. You know, so even with limited opportunities, if you win them, you're golden. Like the problem with Middle Tennessee last year was they had 3 opportunities, they lost all 3, but then other teams, you know, were maybe 6 and 6, and the fans would say, "Oh, well, if we had 12 opportunities, we would be 6 and 6 too." But you can't really use that logic. You know, when you're 0-0, maybe. You know, if you're 0-1, maybe. But you know, 3 is kind of pushing it for a mid-major.
Yeah, sure. And I will say a couple things. I think Nevada was helped because they gamed the RPI last year and had a top, I think, 10 RPI, maybe top 15, to the point where you couldn't leave them out without absolutely saying the RPI is worthless. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is public perception matters, which is why I think like Buffalo right now, like what is legitimately different about what Buffalo is this year and what San Francisco is. Buffalo won by 3 on a neutral court against San Francisco in a game that came down to the final minute. Or they won by 4 on a neutral court, excuse me. They beat a West Virginia team on the road that is bad. Like, that might not even be a quadrant 1 by the end of the year. And they beat Syracuse on the road, who is very average. Like, San Francisco has, I guess they don't have the win of Syracuse, and they don't have the name win of a West Virginia. But, like, there's nothing really different. But if San Francisco was in the polls right now, I think they'd have a better chance of being in. And the polls have no bearing on the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee, but I really think they do. Because I think there's a perception that Buffalo's a lot safer than they really should be. And there's and Nevada was a lot safer than they maybe should have been last year.
And even this year, I've seen Nevada as like 7 seeds on like bracketologies. I would be shocked if they end up getting a 7 seed.
Unless they lose like 3 more Mountain West games.
Yeah. But I mean, even their resume this year, I don't have it in front of me, but
it's not very good.
It was Arizona State, right? Who's
on a neutral court, yeah.
They just lost to Stanford. And then, I mean, San Francisco has that loss to Santa Barbara, which isn't like a terrible team, but it's going to be weighted as a bad loss.
Right.
But then back to the RPI thing. I know that they had very high RPIs, but I think it more has to do with the perception point that you brought up, because it seemed like there's always like a new cutoff for highest RPI to not make it, and it was what Colorado State and Toledo were like in the 20s and didn't make it. So I think the NCAA was willing to kind of push you've just gained the RPI. There's no backing behind this, to a certain extent. I don't know if maybe Nevada and URI's RPIs were strong enough where they couldn't even push it as far as they did with Colorado State and Toledo from a few seasons ago.
Nevada's RPI on Selection Sunday last year was – give me 1 second here. Nevada's RPI on Selection Sunday was 19. Rhode Island's was 14. So like they had a big win over Rhode Island that was better than it really should have been. They beat Rhode Island at home, which is like a good win, but it is not a top 15 win like RPI said it would be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think perception matters. I think the RPI matters. So I guess bringing it back, San Francisco should make the NCAA tournament. They may not. We don't know if they will, but they should. I'm just going to say that. I just don't know if you could have turned on that game for 40 minutes and saw them fight that Gonzaga team to the death and say that team isn't better than the teams that, measure up on Ken Pop.
Another team that is going to be right on the bubble, Alabama, has a sneaky bad loss. Texas A&M. Now, obviously, Admin Gilder's out for the whole season. When I said Alabama was going to be a bubble team before the Kentucky game, mind you, I was called the Bubble Police, which I kind of like that name. Like if I were known as the Bubble Policeman, I think that would be a pretty funny moniker. But nonetheless, Alabama, one step forward, one step back toward bubble territory. The SEC, I don't know how many bids the SEC is going to get. Ole Miss looks like they're going to give them one more than we thought, but Alabama's right there. Arkansas, Missouri, Vanderbilt, I would say no for all those.
Yeah.
Yeah. South Carolina's already dead in the water. Georgia's dead. Texas A&M's dead. I think there's one other team I'm missing that's also dead. And then Auburn's slipping. Mississippi State's slipping. So, I mean, the SEC –
Both teams are in now.
What was that?
Both teams are going to get in.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. But in terms of conference performance and, based on expectation and stuff, the SEC has been worse – a lot worse than people thought coming in, yet with how bad the Pac-12 has been, and then the Big East has been down, A-10, Mountain West, even Big 12 has been down. Seems like SEC's flown under the radar.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to go through it real quick. Like, Tennessee's going to get a bid, might be a number 1 seed. Ole Miss is going to get a bid unless they fall off the face of the earth. LSU's going to get a bid, I would imagine. Kentucky's going to get a bid. Auburn's going to get a bid. Mississippi State's going to get a bid. So that would be right off the top, right there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guaranteed bids. And then I think you'll probably get Bama and Florida. You're going to get at least Bama, Florida, and Arkansas. I think you're going to get at least 1, probably 2 out of that group. So you're going to get 7, 8 bids, which for that league, I think no one can complain. But it is a bit down from what we thought it could be.
Yeah, because, I mean, LSU, Mississippi State were, definitely top 20 in the preseason. I know I thought Florida was going to be very good this year. I didn't see Allen and Hudson and Stone kind of taking the step back that they have. Kentucky's worse than people thought. Auburn's worse than people thought. Tennessee's the same. And then Ole Miss is better. I mean, that's pretty much and then Vanderbilt's hurt. Texas A&M's hurt. But, in terms of perception, they're still fine because other conferences are worse. In terms of expectation, they've certainly disappointed.
Yeah, I will say I tweeted, going back to that, like the A&M loss and the A&M loss specifically was when I was thinking about this, and there's a few other games that it came off in, like the DePaul game. Like, you can afford to lose to the bottom tier of your league if you do it on the road because of the quadrant system. It kind of protects you. Like Ohio State can lose to Rutgers at Rutgers and it doesn't kill you. But if Ohio State loses to Rutgers at home, that is a bad loss. And Alabama at A&M would be a not great loss. At home to A&M is a bad loss.
And speaking of another team giving out bad losses, South Carolina is now 3-0. They won what? They won at Florida, home Mississippi State, and then home Missouri.
Or not at home to Mizzou. You're correct.
But that was a bad loss for Mississippi State. Their resume is solid, right? They have at Dayton, neutral Clemson, home Cincinnati. But none of those teams are locks for the NCAA tournament by any means. So they have some work to do themselves.
Yeah, I mean, South Carolina has no depth, but I mean, if they're going to get 25 from Mike Kotsar, like they got against Mississippi State, I mean, if they can just get solid play from Campbell and Gravette alongside, Lawson, who's been solid, Keyshawn Bryant's like useful-ish, Chris Silva, I mean, they're going to wind up like 10-8 in the SEC, I would say, which would be exceeding expectations preseason, but the non-conference was so bad it's over because you lost to Wyoming, who is absolute garbage, and you lost to Stony Brook, which is a bad loss. You lost to Wofford by 20, which won't be a terrible loss, but it's at home. So yeah, it's over. But I mean, they're not a bad basketball team.
Yeah, I mean when they played Providence earlier in the season, I mean their offense was just a train wreck, and I mean, Gravette's solid, but Trey Campbell couldn't get playing time at Georgetown. I was very surprised that he ended up at South Carolina. Then you're relying a lot on a freshman and AJ Lawson to create. Silva can't stay on the court, so there's certainly potential that even after this 3-0 start to end up like 5-13, like that's certainly still on the table. But I think I don't know their net or like their Ken Palm off the top of my head, but I think even if they keep winning, I still think that they're going to be giving out some pretty ugly losses, especially if teams lose to them at home.
Yeah, it's not going to be good. I would tend to agree. Anything else, Brad? The one game we didn't talk about was probably the biggest one name-wise, and that's just Duke, Florida State. I did not watch a second of this game because I was covering Loyola versus Illinois State. A very fun game in its own right, but certainly didn't have the magnitude of that game. I was following along and saw that Zion was out for a while because he got poked in the eye. I saw the score was staying low, which was very impressive because that's how you're going to beat Duke. Like if this game gets into the 90s, it's over. But then Cam Reddish, what can you say given all the criticism we've seen for him this year to go get 23, to go get a game-winning shot? And then RJ had 32 in this ball game. No assists, which is a little concerning, but 32 in 40 minutes is very impressive. They still don't get much from their bench. They got 32 from RJ, 23 from Cam Reddish, 11 from Zion in 17 minutes, and 8 from Trey Jones. Trey Jones and RJ played all 40. Javin DeLaurier didn't score. Marcus Bolden gave them 3 points and 4 fouls in 24 minutes. Jack White gave him 3 points in 25 minutes, and O'Connell gave him 6 minutes and nothing. So, I mean, the bench is a bit of concern, but that's a big road win.
Yeah, I saw the end of this game. I watched like the middle of the second half and at the beginning of the second half, distractedly participating in the message board meltdown for Providence. But yeah, I guess Zion got poked in the eye. I had the sound off, but I saw that they like kept cutting to Zion on the bench and his eye looked red. So I figured he got poked in the eye or something. But FSU's a strong team. That last play was heavily detailed by like the media and people breaking it down. It seems like I didn't read any of the articles, but from what I kind of gathered, it seems like they had multiple guys like rush toward the rim, and Florida State wanted to protect the lob. But then there was like a switch blown where man either switched when he wasn't supposed to, or vice versa, and it just led to Reddish being just wide open. And good for Reddish. He's been taking some heat recently as someone who's disappointed and maybe fallen down draft boards, maybe still living off his recruiting rank. But that's good for him to come out and hit some shots.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, and I read Sam Vecini did a really good job a couple weeks ago talking about Reddish, and the context with which we had to approach his season, and that when he's the third and maybe the fourth option on offense, it's difficult for a guy who his whole life has been, a point forward creator type to then be kind of pigeonholed into a shooter, especially given his issues with effort. That was one of the main concerns, was, is he going to give you his all 40 minutes a game, and you're going to pigeonhole him to a shooter? That's a really big challenge. And so even just, taking Zion out of the game and putting Cam Reddish in a spot where he has to create more, I mean, it can do wonders for this team. And so obviously big for him to hit that shot. And I was just watching the replay again because of that final shot. And yeah, everybody rushes to the rim, and there was a miscommunication. It looked like Terrence Mann was guarding Reddish, and they had, I think, Jack White set a screen, and no one switched. It looked like Mann just went with White because White was going to the rim, and no one switched it. So that was just really bad defense, and giving credit for him for hitting it though.
Absolutely. And then one other non-game related note. Tristan Clark done for the year. He was having a pretty big year for Baylor, sophomore breakout guy. He's done for the year, and I think that's it for Baylor. I don't think that they had much of a shot even with him. They've already had, I think, 2 or 3 two by-game loss, I think, maybe even 3. But now they're going to settle into that bottom foursome, I think, with them, Baylor, West Virginia, Oklahoma State, and Kansas State.
Yeah, no, I would agree. They're way down. Clark was good for them. It's a really tough year overall for Baylor. I mean, they've been banged up. They're finally getting Makai Mason going, and now Clark goes out. So we'll see how they develop over the season. I know Scott Drew will have them competing. They just don't have the talent. So is there anything else before we head into picks?
I just want to touch on one other thing. The JUCO Top 100 rankings came out. I just want to give a quick kind of who's who. So number 1 was Chris Duarte, who's heading to Oregon.
Very good kid, very good player.
He was a late stock riser who I think committed to Western Kentucky, but also had Syracuse interest.
He was highly rated, and then no one would touch him because I think of grades, and then he all of a sudden starts to resurface because people think he might qualify. And Western Kentucky snabbed him, and then he never qualified.
He's certainly someone to watch. Oregon obviously super disappointing this year, but they have reinforcements on the way, it seems. Cam Mack, number 2, going to St. John's. He's going to be the starting point guard next year. I mean, Mikey Dixon left. Pons is most likely headed to the NBA. So he's someone to watch.
Cam Mack is really good. He was a kid. He was signed to Stephen F. Austin, and everyone I knew around that program was hyping him up like he was going to be the next star of that team. And then he left a month into the season and wasn't really playing. It was very weird, but he's putting up absurd numbers at JUCO.
And then good news for Nebraska fans, Jervay Green, who, I mean, Nebraska's roster for next year is probably going to be gutted, especially if Roby goes pro. But I mean, if he doesn't, you have the number 3 JUCO kid in Jervay Green with Datchin Burke, the Robert Morris transfer. You have Roby. Thomas Allen's come along this year. A couple other rotation guys maybe take a step up. Maybe, but I think most likely Nebraska's in for a rough year. But they have a top JUCO kid. And just a couple other heavy hitters throughout the rankings. Alonzo Verge, former top 100 recruit, going to Arizona State, combo guard, scorer. Grades, I think, there too.
Yes.
And then Khalid Thomas at Texas Tech. I've seen that people are pretty excited about him. He power forward. He should slot in for Tarek Owens in that starting lineup, or maybe comes off the bench behind Kayvon Moore. And then just one other, I'll give 2 other ones to keep an eye on. Brandon Ratchell, who was on LSU, transferred late, combo forward, doesn't shoot it, but very athletic. He's still available. And then Tyson Jolly, who played for Cal and Baylor, or maybe he was just committed to Cal. I think he had medical issues at Baylor. He's someone who is known for his shooting ability. He's still available, ranking in the top 11.
Yeah, no, good calls. I had a couple I wanted to touch on. Eric Parrish was good at Akron. He's been awesome in JUCO at Bossier Parish in Louisiana. He's headed to Nevada. So he'll be a nice, I think, small ball 4 at times for them. and then just some mid-major guys who are highly touted in these rankings. It's always interesting because I think a lot of these JUCO guys should be going to where they're going to play. They only have 2 years. They don't need to go be a rotation player at a high major for 2 years. Go be a star. Go be a Jeremy Harris at Buffalo. He was like a top 5 JUCO kid and has been a star for 2 years. That's the perfect thing for more JUCO guys to do. And a few guys did that. Buffalo has 2 of them in Andre Allen, number 8. He's like a 4-5 who will replace Perkins. And then they have number 27, James Rojas, who's like a combo forward. He's from Western New York originally. They were recruiting him. He didn't qualify, so they told him to go to Hutchinson because it's a good, it's like a JUCO factory. They got him on the flip side. He's really good, super talented kid that they really like. And then they also have one more, like a 3-year JUCO, Dury Caldwell. So he's a 1-year JUCO guy at Daytona State. He can shoot it. He's a 6'5" guard. So Buffalo reloading nicely because they'll have those 3 guys who are top 100 JUCO kids, 2 of them in the top 30. They'll have Devontae Jordan back, who's a very nice player, can really play defense and is starting to improve as a shooter. They'll have the two transfers they have sitting out this year, Gabe Grant from Houston, who was like a top JUCO kid, and Antoine Johnson from Middle Tennessee, who can score. They'll have Javon Graves, who's 10 a game this year. He's back at guard. They'll have Janathan Williams and Rondo Segou, who are 2 very good recruits. Williams is averaging 4 a game, Segou averaging 3, but both are like playing rotation minutes on a good team, and we're like very highly regarded. Janathan Williams is a top 150 recruit. Segou has had like 3 high major offers. So, Buffalo is going to be fine. If Nate Oates doesn't want to leave, he doesn't have to because they're loaded.
And then just 2 others that I noticed on the list that I thought would be relevant. Roberto Giddens, he was a pretty highly regarded recruit, if I'm not mistaken. Went to Washington State. I'm not sure if he ever played there. He's headed to Santa Barbara. They're building quite the team. So that's certainly one to watch. And then Valdir Emanuel is heading to St. John's. Rebounder, high energy guy, was committed to Seton Hall, then St. Joe's, now off to St. John's for next year. And then last year's, I believe, top ranked JUCO guy, Hewitt Alec, who I thought was going to start at center for TCU. He was the backup center to Kevin Samuel, and he is transferring, which makes, I believe, 3 rotation players have declared that they're transferring midseason from TCU, which turned a very deep team, and at least in terms of potential rotation guys, into a team that's down to 9 plus a red shirt, 8 of which are in the rotation. So that's a very, very tight team going forward, especially with Jalen Fisher's injury history.
Yeah, very strange to see those guys transfer. Like on a good team, leaving midseason when you're getting some minutes. Not getting as much as they'd like probably, but getting some minutes. So something to watch certainly. But the JUCO route is very interesting, and we'll try to cover that for you, especially over the summer. Maybe we'll do a JUCO episode. We could maybe get on a JUCO recruiting expert, ask him some takes on some good players. That JUCO advocate does a really nice job. Covers a lot of JUCO basketball. Runs a couple of showcases. Maybe he could be a guest. We'll see. If you're listening, we'll hit you up over the summer, my man. Anything else?
Because my knowledge is far too superficial. Other than name I recognize and guy going to interesting spot. We could use a deeper breakdown than what I can provide for JUCO.
Yeah, absolutely. So picks. I'm gonna pick. We're gonna do 3 each. Clear one here: Virginia Tech in Charlottesville. Huge game, Brad. Who do you like? I think I'm just gonna roll with Virginia, as I have pretty much every single time I've been asked to pick Virginia in the last 2 years.
I will also be going with Virginia. They've sneakily been undefeated, as crazy as that sounds. They're just rolling along. They destroyed Clemson, although Clemson kind of made it pretty close for the end of the first half. Virginia just needs a stronger test. I think that their strongest game at this point has probably been Wisconsin on a neutral, off the top of my head. Maybe at Maryland, right? So probably either one of those two. Hopefully we can get some compelling matchups between them and the other top teams in the ACC, and this will certainly be the first of those. Although Virginia Tech's probably a top 10 team, although it's probably a weaker ninth in the country than in past years.
Yeah, I would definitely buy that. It's a very interesting team. Like they didn't blow out Georgia Tech like I thought they would, but the metrics love them. Your pick.
All right, I'm gonna go with St. John's over Creighton. I think the demise of Creighton has been significantly overblown. I've seen some people suggest that Greg McDermott could be on the hot seat. I don't buy that one bit. I still think that they're very much alive for this year. What their worst loss was like Butler, right? So they're still very much alive. But I think St. John's with their talent, and I think Pond should be back. I saw he said he was feeling better. I saw someone report that. So I think St. John's gets back on track, and I think both teams are probably NCAA tournament teams.
This is the road game where if Creighton can get it, it'd be big. I mean, it's a game St. John's needs. I think St. John's will come out with energy. I'll be interested to see how they handle the size of Creighton with Krompel, especially. This is a team that really struggled with the Lujaby. I only watched maybe the final 5 or so minutes of that ball game, but every possession, it was just throw it down low, and C.D. Keita wasn't in the game. And Justin Simon was trying to guard Lujaby, and that was just not a matchup that will work very well. So I'm going to go with Creighton here. I think their size will do it, even though that game means a lot for St. John's.
Oh, also worth noting for Creighton is that Jacob Epperson's done for the year. I thought he was going to take a nice step this year. He showed a lot last year after breaking his red shirt, but he's done for the year with a knee injury.
That's a good note. I missed that one. All right, my pick. Florida State at Pitt. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to touch on Pittsburgh and give a big shout out to Jeff Capel. They didn't pull it off like I thought they might when they were leading in the second half against NC State on the road. If they had won that game, like that was a legit NCAA tournament team. They'd have a win over Louisville, a win at NC State in a weak bubble year. They have the bad loss to Niagara, but otherwise, like nothing that bad. They're probably not going to make the tournament. Like that's pretty overblown at this point. But Xavier Johnson, the freshman, playing great basketball. Trey McGowan's is playing great basketball. Audice Tony is starting to come along. He's a 6'6" kind of small ball forward who could do some stuff. And it's going to depend who they can recruit because they're going to need more than that. And they've missed on some guys so far. But winning these games and getting the Pete back rocking will really help in the recruiting effort. So it'll be very interesting. I think Pitt at home is an interesting test for Florida State. How do they come back off of a heartbreaking loss? I'm going to pick Pitt.
Oh, I'm going to go with Florida State here. I think that they're just better than people have given credit for. Another team that's been under the radar a little bit. They would have been firmly above the radar had they beaten Duke yesterday. But especially now with Phil Kofer back, I think this team is in a nice position to maybe even move up to the top tier with the top at one point I thought the top tier was 8 teams. Now I think it could be 6 teams with Michigan and Michigan State in there, and then like Auburn falling out, Kansas falling out, Nevada too. But you brought up Pitt's recruiting. They are in on 2 guys who I think are top 150-ish, or at least high major caliber. One being Qudus Wahab, who's a center. I think he's more of like a long-term guy, but he's like top 150. He would certainly be a welcome addition, along with Terrell Brown and Kenny Chukwuka, who they have there now. And then also Darian Sebrin, who's like a big athletic combo guard who doesn't shoot it, but he's like a versatile defender. I think he would be a great fit alongside the guards that they already have, and they could play all 3 together. He just came up with a final 5 of all teams that could use him, but Pitt might have the most minutes to offer despite having their backcourt set for the future. Yeah,
it'll be interesting. They've missed on some guys they wanted. I know they're still in on Kareem Koulibaly. They're looking at him. I saw the report was that Wahab wants to go to Pitt, but there's like people in his circles that are pushing him to Georgetown. So we'll see what happens there. But Pitt needs to grab some kids, and Jeff Capel will do that, I think. So Go with Pitt. I think they're going to rock that place on, I believe, Tuesday night when they play this game.
All right, I'm going to go with
Monday night, tomorrow night.
Oh, wait, this game's tomorrow? Florida State Pitt?
Yeah, it's a good slate.
Well. Yeah, I noticed that it was better than I had thought. I think Florida, Mississippi State. I think Mississippi State gets back on track here. I can't figure out Florida. I mean, they just destroyed Butler. They looked like they were on another tier. Yet Butler beat them in the Bahamas, and they've kind of they lost to South Carolina. Even though the Bulldogs have been a bit disappointing, I'll go with Mississippi State here.
Yeah, Mississippi State at home. Florida's just weird. Like they just don't seem to be all together right now. I think they'll lose this game, and they're 15th in Haslametrics right now in their performance rankings, but they're out of his bracketology deserves. And that kind of speaks to their inability to win games they've been in. And
this one.
LSU at Ole Miss. I think it's a very interesting game. We touched on Ole Miss a bit. You mentioned LSU has a chance to rattle off some wins. This would be a great one on the road. I think Ole Miss will win this game, but it will be a battle.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up LSU's schedule so I can give the exact sequence of these games that certainly look very winnable, and when they could have this great record in the SEC, certainly going to gain a lot of attention in terms of voters. So they've already beaten Alabama and then won at Arkansas. They're at Ole Miss, but then their next 5 games: home South Carolina, home Georgia, at Missouri, at Texas A&M, home Arkansas. So if they get this Ole Miss win, I mean, I would bet on them being 8-0, or at the very least 7-1.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to go with LSU here. I think that their talent level is super high, and then I think they've fallen off the radar. It's just like one game here, one game there. The Houston game, which was winnable, would have put them back on the radar, and then their kind of Thanksgiving tournament also kind of knocked them. But I think that they're certainly good enough to kind of live up to the expectation of top 25 in the preseason.
Yeah, no, they're fighting back. The Oklahoma State loss is not going to age well, but that's all right. I think they'll be fine. And then your pick to wrap us up.
I'm going to pick one that's not on the board. Providence Seton Hall, 6:30 tip. I hate 6:30 home tips. I gotta ask to leave work a half hour early for Providence to lose. I'm gonna have to eat a sandwich while I drive, and it's gonna be a loss and then a 45-minute drive home. So it's gonna be fun. Seton Hall's gonna win. They're gonna kill us.
At Providence wins it. I'm sorry, Brad. I have more belief in the Friars than you do, it seems.
I have no faith. None. But interesting note about Providence last game. So Drew Edwards coming into the game was 0 for 12 from the field. He had 19 points and hit 5 shots.
That's unreal.
He was coming in, he was 0 for 12.
Likely grad transfer Drew Edwards.
Who knows? I mean, he could be the starting 2 guard next year. Who knows?
I certainly hope not. With Reeves, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's probably going to be something like Duke, Reeves, Diallo, Nichols, Watson, but
I would pair Ashton Langford and Duke. Go small, those 2, and then Reeves at the 3, Diallo at the 4, Watson at the 5, and then you have like Gant, Nichols, White off the bench. It's your 8.
Yeah. And then Khalif Young.
Yeah.
And then Chris Monroe has gone to like 6 or 7 minutes the last few games. Hit a couple shots against Georgetown, but he was gassed after like 5 minutes. You could tell. What was I going to say? Cooley does this thing where like when things are going bad, he just puts these 5 guys and just rides them to the end, which I think is actually smart. Like it's kind of like everyone else has played so poorly. Like you 5, like no matter what happens, you're going to go to the end. And usually it works for him. But toward, in a double overtime, they were absolutely gassed. So it did not work this past time, but it has gotten Providence a few wins that maybe they shouldn't have gotten.
It probably would have worked if they had fouled up 3. And with that, we will wrap it up before Brad has an aneurysm. Thanks for listening, everybody. Hope you all had a great week. May come to you with a midweek pod. I got a busy week ahead. I'm headed to Assembly Hall for women's basketball, Northwestern women versus Indiana. I'll be on play-by-play for that. So if you're interested in listening to me do basketball, go ahead and listen. I'll tweet the link. Appreciate y'all listening. Have a great night.